Hi YouTube. This is the chapter 2 of the Ford Focus transmission, the 4F27E. We got a little time today and we took care of one issue, and we've discovered more. That's the way it works around here. So we lowered the transmission down by taking off the rear mount and the top mount. I didn't film it because it's been done quite a bit to other places, but the transmission mount on the top is kind of interesting. I'll show you just that because it's easy to see. Right there, this is the main one going to the transmission, and in this frame around the outside edge, these 4 bolts come out, and then there's a large hollow section in here where this actually comes through, so it makes it actually kind of easy to line things back up again. But just talking about that, there's some components. It's 92, 94 today in Michigan, which is let me get back in the frame, which is kind of abnormal for the middle of the summer. Michigan has long, nightmarish winters, but the summers are fantastic, about as good as anywhere you'll ever find. So I lowered the transmission down. I took off the end plate off the transmission. I'll show you that here in a second. And going in after the intermediate band, it's the intermediate 4th overdrive band, so shorthand is the 2-4 intermediate band. And we saw that it was burnt. I'll show you in a second. And in addition to that, we discovered another oops inside. So we'll show you that, and nothing is all that lucky today. We were able to successfully go ahead and bore out the servo pin bore. I'll show you one second here. This is the intermediate servo. This pin right here is where you'll find some wear. Not on the pin itself, but inside the aluminum transmission. This pin is hard. So basically the surface finish is varying a little bit, or the bore was a little bit chunky from the manufacturer. Don't know. But they make a sliding bushing which goes over the top of this, which you go ahead and install that. So hold on one second, I'll get that bushing for you. I bought a spare. Okay, going back to the servo bushing, they look about like this. Now this one is distinct for the 4F27. It actually has this hole inside. See it right there. And what you do is you bore out the case itself. It goes with a 7/16 to a 1/2 inch stepped reamer set it, and then there's a guide plate and a internal bushing made up for it. The kits are around $300. I was able to weasel my way into borrowing one short term, and I got mine done successfully today. So the bushing, once you ream out the case, bushing is going to slip inside the case, and then the bushing is the servo is actually going to come right up inside and restore that fit. Now it isn't just a sliding fit, there's a bit of a hydraulic fit here as well. So if there's too much slack, you start losing pressure where you shouldn't, and away you go. To apply the band, they apply pressure on this side, and it pushes the band up, which grabs the band, and here comes the band. It sits in there, oh, something like this, and when this is pushed up, it clamps the band around the drum. I'll show you the drum in just a moment, but that's how you apply. But also they apply pressure on the release side. If this side is the pressure side, then this side right here is the release side. So there's pressure on both sides of this servo, which slides inside the case bore. It's not the bore where the seal rides, it's the bore where the pin rides, where the wear is going to be. Okay? Alright, so yes, I bought an extra because, you know, it was there. The bushing itself is around $13, so not a gigantically tough thing to make if you were making it yourself. If I had the dimensions, which I kind of do now, I would probably make my own from this point forward. Not that I'm going to do that many of these, but you may have a friend or something that needs something made. So as I was getting it apart, I'll change the frame down there just a little bit. You can see. Okay, this is the end cover that sits on the edge of the transmission. Bring this over just a little bit. So it just sits on there, no problem. And on this side is where we found some problems. The sealing rings here look pretty good, and then there's another set of sealing rings here which look pretty good. A little bit of wear on this surface here, not too bad, but I'll try to get you in the shot. You can see that bushing, it is hogged out. Okay, and there's a reason for that. There's been a lot of trash flowing through this one. Ordinarily you don't see this all that often, but on this one I wasn't expecting it, but it did show up. So what I found was this little guy, which was part of a thrust bearing setup. Sits right on here, and because this is bolted to the end of the case, you can see on this side from the spalling, and let me get that in frame for you. There we go. The delay between this and the monitor takes a couple seconds to get used to. That is just eaten up. So those bearings failed, little roller bearings, and they started disintegrating. And when they disintegrated, they started passing some trash around, but they also started passing some of that trash in to the end of this right here, and then into, this is the drum that the band rides on. If you can see down inside, there is a bunch of trash down inside of here, and it is torn up. So the roller bearing failed, and that set up chewing up its own rollers, and the trash was getting passed on through the transmission. Well, fortunately, this is all on its own side on the outside. In other words, the coolant goes, the trans fluid comes in, goes around, and then it's pushed back down. So yes, it headed for the bottom of the pan, not into the planetary gear set, as near as I can tell. I don't have a hydraulic diagram, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it was headed. So all of this trash, it did some wear, it did some damage, did a few bad things inside, but all in all, it could have been a lot worse. So, by the way, you're probably wondering, what is this thing he's got? Well, that's a puppy pad. We trained our puppy, and she learned quickly, so we really had an abundance of these left over, and they came out to the shop with me, and frankly, they are great. So, under normal circumstances, your band is going to ride on this outside of the drum. All right, and the outside of the drum is locked to this sun gear. So when you want to do the engagement of the band for second gear and or overdrive, the servo, back in the shot, servo is just about like this. The servo is applied, this side's anchored, the servo applies, and the band grabs and holds that drum. Okay, so it releases just like that. Okay, so having done automatics in my youth quite a bit, you can look at this, look at the chowdering going on here. That actually has worn down into it a little bit. This thing was getting hot, really, really hot. And this was a slow burn. It was chattering and slipping and just getting basically nasty. You can see where the fluid is burnt, where this is starting to change colors. The metal's getting discolored. So this thing is going to be hard, hard, hard. So once it does that, it's not going to react to a world of the band. Now the band itself, you can kind of see, well, it's hard to tell anything about it. It was getting worn down pretty much, but it was no longer holding anything. You can kind of see where it's very smooth. Ordinarily, they look a little bit like a brake pad in its function. So I was able to get this part really reasonable. A whole new setup out of a direct takeout. It's like when you go to the transmission, the scrapyard where they have transmissions and stuff. They disassemble and resell on eBay. The parts are probably absolutely fine. And in this case, there's only one piston inside and one clutch. The part that I really, really needed was in here where this isn't worn. And from there, I think I'm going to do pretty good. The price was very reasonable. They did a best offer on eBay, and I was able to pick that up really right. And this is the one I need to go after now. This is chowdered up, but there doesn't seem to be any shortage of these. I think actually in some cases they actually are rebuilding them, turning them down and setting it in here. This one I'd rather just, I can fix it, but I'd rather just get it and get this thing done. I've got too many projects lined up that sit and fiddle with 2 weeks of making a bushing here. Interesting thing about this transmission is this seal, there is no seal here. It's actually put on with silicone. In the old days, that was a no-no because we didn't have good silicone, but in this case, there is no end gasket, so don't drive yourself crazy looking for an end gasket. We cleaned it up. There's 2 O-rings that go on, approximately here and here. Actually, in that area. Oh, right here, sorry. It's upside down. There are 2 O-rings that sit right here, and then basically a silicone around the outside edge of it, and it both goes together. I'm going to check the height on these parts when I get the different set to see if there's anything different as far as in-play. I don't have the full gauging set to tear this thing all the way out. I was trying to pull a fast one. I was trying to get the band servo redone, which that went perfectly fine. The tools were absolutely great, and I was able to get that done. It's in there. I've got some bearing mount set up in there, and I'm just going to let it set while I chase down one of these, and then we'll get this thing hopefully back together again. Now, I'll be putting a trans filter in line to pick up any of that small dogs and children trash that may still be floating around, but likely it's where it's going to be. It's at the bottom of the trans cooler or somewhere else. It wasn't at the bottom of the pan, so I mean, there was a little bit of fine material, but not something I'm going to get worried about. So anyway, that is the latest update from this puppy, and I appreciate your time. Thanks for subscribing, those of you that have, and if you don't, please consider if you like this kind of work. This won't be my entire content fixing cars. Fixing cars just seemed to be what came up this year. The machine tools are in. We've got a lot of stuff to do. Among them, there's my Honda Goldwing, which has seen very little riding so far this year. But we've got horizontal mill we need to wire up. We need to get back on our vertical mill and finish up the DRO install. It's ready, it's running, it's working. I just need to tidy up the wiring. We have a small project to help on a keyway broaching for a 66 Thunderbird. It's the convertible hardtop. It lifts in. There's an arm on there that we need to true up and knock a keyway in it for the gear. Previously it had 2 D flats on it, so it was holding up all that weight against that little flat, and basically the gear was brass and the shaft was not a great compound, so it shows some wear. So we'll be fixing that up for a friend of mine. In a few more weeks we'll be taking the kids to Disney, so they're gone. And there goes the compressor. Thanks for subscribing and thanks for watching. On a side note from another project, the Yamaha Vino 50 is still running. How do you like that, JB? I did something and it stayed fixed for a little while. That's awesome. Now, look the other way, folks. The garage project is not went underway yet. We're still fixing things before we can finish the garage. So, here we have the housing. Inside of here, we're actually going to just take a quick look around. We've got a replacement piston for it. Take out the snap ring. Take out the housing. And it's important that when you do these to go ahead and take everything out and flip it right over so you maintain the orientation. And there is a thrust bearing. Usually when you get into these, the pictures are not that big of a help. So from within this, change up here, switch over to a pick. And this is the one I got from the eBay seller, okay? It is not the one that was trashed. So we have the snap ring, put it in like that. Then we have two sets of clutches inside. All right. So for the first set of clutches on the outside, I'm going to turn that assembly over. Kind of get an idea down in there. And then we have the other set of clutches. First thing you do, take a quick look. These look to be in pretty good condition. It's a 150,000 mile unit, but Usually what you're looking for here is radial or hot spots, radial streaks or hot spots. Shows that it's been slipping. It starts to slip and it starts to show markings, and then when it gets too far, then it starts hot spotting and checking. These look to be absolutely just fine. This is the reverse clutch in this one, so I wouldn't expect there to be much going on. Alright, so we're going to take those, flop them over. And we're going to come back to the smaller clutch right here. I'm going to pop this baby open and have a look. You can see that there's a little bit of, I don't know whether it's floor dry or something from when they had it stored. Don't know. I'm going to bring this clutch pack apart. Alright, some really thick discs using the same methodology we used previously. Not bad. Not bad at all, really. Yeah, it's had slight slippage, but nothing dramatic. Like it's going to get by with just a fresh cleanup, and this should be fine. One nice thing about automatics is you can air check them. And when you go in, there's a hydraulic piston underneath this, which raises up, and actually the piston moves, and it compresses this clutch stack together. Just squeezes it, and just like that, just pinches it. And whatever was being held by that motion, in the case of this, it's going to be this drum over on the other side. It's going to be grabbing that drum, it's going to be holding it, which is connected to this, which is connected to the larger housing, which is connected to the band, believe it or not. Okay, so right from there, and right from there. So we'll wash this out, and then we will go ahead and air check it. At the bottom here there is a O-ring. It's not super critical. It's there. It helps with the dampening of the clutch application. It really doesn't do much else. And then underneath this center snap ring here, there's going to be a set of springs underneath that. When you compress this down, move the snap ring out, and then this comes out. The pistons on this one are all molded. So if you see this down inside, there's a Belleville washer inside of here, which is holding tension down, and the washer itself is providing the spring pressure to release the piston. That's all it really does, is it releases the piston, and hydraulic force comes in through these small ports right here and actually applies that piston. Okay, hydraulic pressure comes in here, pushes it up, and then the same trick is going on. It actually grabs the clutches and pinches them. Okay, we're going to get this washed up just a little bit, and then we'll bring you back. Okay, I just went through quickly and restacked these clutches up for you. I went and borrowed the original side cover. You can see the sealing rings right here, really close. And the only tint I want to show you here is just a quick air check. This is standard in transmission repair. I've got my shop air regulated down to 40 psi. You don't need a ton. But this bottom set of sealing rings is going to be for this reverse clutch. And it should just drop down on there nice and gently. There we go. Okay. And then for the other remaining clutch, I'm going to add that one in as well. I don't know, I thought I was going too easily. Now I got to line the clutches up. No, let's just change that up. Okay, so for the first one, we have two passages. Rotate this around so you can maybe see it better. Two passages right here. That is for that clutch. I'm just applying a little bit of shop air to it. Hopefully you can see it. I know you can probably hear it. Hear that nice thump? That's what you're shooting for. So in the case of the original assembly, there was nothing wrong with that clutch as far as the piston and so forth. And then I'm going to add the small one on. Similar type format. I'm going to use the other hole. See it? Nice movement. No big air leakage. Again, my shop air is down to like 40 psi. You don't need a lot. You really, in some cases on these, don't want to use full shop air, 120 or better. You don't need it, and you don't want to. I'd rather it sealed at a lower psi than it sealed at something higher. So we'll go from there. But I just wanted to show you that real quick. That's just a standard check. We are going to do the same check on the housing that I'm going to be installing, and we'll go from there. Thank you. Okay, we've got the two housings right here. And again, we know that this housing right here has some wear. This is the one I've got for the replacement. And I've taken the original washer and measured it out. And again, because it has the wear, I'm going to have to hit the high side of this. Oops, sorry. There we go. And we're reading at about 84 thousandths. Okay. Remember, it was my guess that they would be roughly the same. And here is the new one without any wear. And there you go. Measuring a couple of different spots. And again, I didn't break out the good tools for this. This is about 83 thousandths. So pretty much right on the same. So I stacked them up using the new thrust bearing, or excuse me, the new thrust washer. And I just want to go over that just real quick again, that this side down is going to be the bottom race for this roller. And then this roller actually has a face on the other side which goes down against the drum itself. So they effectively are a combined, they are a selective fit thrust washer bearing assembly. Okay, so set this up right here, just using a real quick parallel that I've got right here. I'm just going to do just a rough one, and again, the purist in the audience, I'm going to just selectively come down and go down to this surface right here, which is the machine surface reference, 2.517. All right, I'm going to take the same thrust bearing out. I'm going to go back to the original housing. Flip it over. Roughly do the same setup. .532. Go back up a little bit. Hit it again. .543. 2.528. See if we can repeat that. .540. So obviously this is not a repeatable gauge. 2.528. Hey, you try long enough, you get the same measurement again. All right, so we're going to maybe set up something a little bit more elaborate, but the intent is that the thrust is selectable thrust is the same size, and the bearing is approximately the same, and the housing has a little bit of wear. Probably some raised ridges from all of that stuff is probably helping throw off some of the measurements, but the measurement system we're using is highly unlikely, and highly unreliable. That's a better word. All right, I'll bring you back. Yeah, I thought you might be interested in the sealing on these. Over there it shows up. Yeah, there you go. Interlocking tabs with a slight offset to allow it to basically form a solid ring and support itself. These are Teflon or a Teflon type material. They're very, very good. We used to use steel rings in the old days, and they were okay, but when we start bringing in aluminum parts, aluminum bores, steel versus aluminum, the steel one. There's one that I broke, taking it out a while ago. And there's one that's still in decent shape, the interlock. So don't go crazy on those things, but also be very gentle with the bore when you're taking them off. I use a pick, but I use very lightly. I try to squeeze the ring as far as I can, and then get a little bit of overlap there, and then just gently pick it out of there. All right, we'll bring you back. Okay, we've changed out the sealing rings. We have the brand new set on there. In addition to that, if you're using a Transtech kit, which I am, there's a special note to you that they've changed the seals. The direct clutch seal has been changed from a green to a brown, so they're only shipping brown ones in the bag. So here is the sealing kit for the sealing rings that I'm using. Seems to be a relatively good quality, so we're going to run with it. I purchase all my parts from Prindle in Dearborn, Michigan, PRNDL, and seemed to be a reputable place, and had everything I needed, so good for them. Anyway, we've got those set in there. The fingers are interlocking, so you shouldn't have a problem with that. And I'm going to apply a little bit of green assembly lube to the surfaces just to make it a little sticky. This is the heavy stuff. It comes in different grades, but because I'm doing this sideways into the transmission, which is still in the vehicle, I'm going to take every chance I can to do this. Now, when this gets going, it will dissolve into the oil pretty much harmlessly and go from there. But especially around spots like where that thrust bearing is going to go, the thrust washer, I'm going to cheat and use everything I can. I'm not going to use the side that was previously done. I'm going to use the opposite side. Hi YouTube. Just to follow up on the Focus transmission. I've been driving it for the last week. We've had no further issues from the transmission. My 1, 2, 3, and 4 gears are all reestablished. We've done a daily scan for any kind of a failure mode or any kind of a code relative to it. No slip codes, no failure codes as far as a shift solenoid or anything like that. So I think we've pretty much put that one back on track. There were a couple of small items. I had to shorten the exhaust system up just a smidge because it had to, we laughingly, my son and I called the death rattle. If you were put it in reverse and the exhaust system was just barely contacting the rear toe space and making just a heck of a rattle. Other than that, the repair went fairly smoothly. I've got a couple of videos you've seen previously. The valve body cleaned up nicely. Really not a fan of the bonded gasket on the separator plate. Takes a while to clean up. Get in there with a razor blade and just go to town. Make sure everything's spotless. 1 or 2 or 5 cans of brake fluid, whatever you need. I don't disassemble the valve body completely. Years ago I kind of learned that in my younger days, that especially when you start moving forward with aluminum valves, aluminum housing, and using picks and stuff like that, you can get yourself into trouble fairly quickly. I know the full procedure is to disassemble, clean, do all that great stuff, and that's fine. I absolutely support that if that's what you need to do. Myself, I had great success and still continue to do so, just making sure the valves move freely, make sure there's no errant debris, and clean it, but don't disassemble it. That's my recommendation. Don't have to listen to me. Do it your own way. That's fine. But if you put the slightest nick on an edge of a valve trying to pop it out, it's going to show up again. So the valve body went smoothly. Got it back together. There's no check balls or anything in this one like in the old days to cause you heartache. Getting the transmission, where I removed the cover and got the band out and got the housing replaced, that was done in the car. So just so you know, it is doable. You lower the engine down, remove the left-hand half shaft, you get a little bit more room, and remove both mounts. Make sure you're safe about securing it. Make sure you don't put yourself underneath the engine or get your hands in around it whenever it's in an unstable position. And got it down. Once you get it out, the manual shaft, which is the linkage running through the bottom of the transmission, that is one of your tougher things to get. Once you get the valve body down, the manual shaft, you'll see it running right across. It runs right over the top of the servo, so you can't remove the 2.4 servo unless you get the manual shaft out of the way. It can be done in the vehicle. I did it. You remove the roll pin from the back, and then you slide that all forward. And it worked out pretty well. Once we got that out, we were able to get the servo out. We did the boring, as I mentioned previously. That worked out great. Reassembly, once we got everything back, I took the clutches apart, I cleaned them, everything looked fine as far as the clutch discs, the steel plates, everything looked fine. The band was the main culprit, and we replaced that entire housing. So the component that I got off of eBay with the drum, I'll make a correction on myself. There are 2 pistons inside of there with 2 separate clutches, but really there's only one clutch associated with the drum. The other one rides in that housing. The assembly, I used Transmax. There was a green assembly lube. It's the thick stuff. It's kind of almost like putty. But put that on there. It stuck very well. Everything went into position. I had no trouble with stuff falling apart. And I got a new roller bearing in there and a thrust bearing, and I double checked the height. Everything seems to be fine. The way it looks, it might have been a little snug from the manufacturer. I can't say, but it certainly caused a lot of damage related to that. The bearings like that, there's not much load there. It's only controlling the in-play. There's not really anything on there that should cause it to wear like that. Again, road tested out just fine. Very satisfied with the results. And while we were there, we also changed out the lower control arms. I recommend doing that if you have a vehicle with 100,000 or more and you maybe have a potential for a suspect ball joint concern. The control arms are very inexpensive. Might as well get them. And in my case, I have a little clip coming up where the bushing actually was broken free on the passenger side rear, and it really was not helping itself. So the handling's improved. Everything else seems to be doing great. I did have to charge up the air conditioner, and it's actually doing very well. So again, thanks for subscribing, those that have. If you haven't and you enjoy this content, please consider it. And thank you for your time, and I appreciate your viewing this. Thank you. 2007 Ford Focus. Well, I think that's right. It's supposed to be glued and not broken off, but anyway, mine is.